This is an origin story of mighty, amazing, incredible Gutenberg!
Hi, I'm Gutenberg Martin. I have a master's degree in history and I'm a surveyor of historical buildings. And today I will tell you about the origin story of this town of Gutenberg. So it didn't start by being bitten by the radioactive spider. The superpower of Kutná Hora starts with monk Antoň, according to legend, who found the silver. So this superpower is more like by Batman or Iron Man. It's that the town is filthy rich. Yeah. Right now I'm standing on the northwest corner of the town. In the map of Gutenberg in the game, it's right behind the corner, and this place is supposedly one of the oldest mining settlements here. Again, it's more like legends than the facts, because it's hard to prove anything like that. But supposedly it's the oldest settlement. It's called Antica Kutna, and so after that the name Kutná Hora, and it was also the name of the mine. So the name of the mine and name of this mining settlement, they were the same. So this church you can see behind me is originally from the end of 13th century. That was probably before some wooden church, and then they built the stone one. But anyway, as you can see, it was baroquized beyond recognition. But you have to trust me, in the core it's from the turn of 13th and 14th century. And that's the only reminder of this mining village, because otherwise everything around here is younger. Why isn't there something more? That's probably, that's my theory, but I think it's quite logical that this settlement was outside of the town walls. So during the centuries of sieges it was probably several times destroyed. Yeah, I told you last time about this monk who found 3 silver rods, and after that they started to pop up all these mining settlements all around here. But it probably took some while before this silver fever really took its place, because about this silver ore there is a problem with processing. As I was told, it's always a little bit tricky to get the silver, the metal, from this ore, because you have some other metals attached to it, and you have to find by every deposit some most effective process how to get the silver out. So it probably took a couple of years, maybe even decades, before they realized this is really something worth mining. So we can guess the silver was discovered here in around half of the 13th century, but the biggest this fever, as I called it, was from the 70s or 80s of the 13th century, and then before year 1300 this was total boom around here. But as I told before, this mining settlement, even though it was probably the oldest and maybe one of the most important, was in the end not the center of gravity of this urban area, but it moved about 200 meters or a couple of 100 meters that way, so to the southeast, and that's where today historical center of Kutná Hora is. So why that happened and what happened, I will tell you when I'm back in a warm space of my office, because it's pretty cold out here, and I would like to show you also some maps. So let's do this.
So the silver was found, the mining settlements were all around, and we get to the turn of 13th and 14th century, so about 100 years before Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The most important person for development of Gutenberg in this period is King Wenceslas II. So he was the great-grandfather of Wenceslas IV and Sigismund. But not in the manly way, you know. It was his daughter who married John of Luxembourg. So here, around year 1300, he came with a huge economic reform, and by this he completely rebuilt the core of economy in the Bohemian Kingdom. As I see it, it had three pillars. One was the mining law, the second one was mint in Italian court, and the third was new coin, the groschen. So let's start with the mining law. In year 1300, Wenceslas II issued a law which was called in Latin Jus Regale Montanorum, which means the royal mining law. The goal of this law was to organize the mining to the maximum effect. The main theme you can imagine as the saying from Frank Herbert's Dune. So the silver must flow. That means you had to mine at all time. If you were unable to mine, the king takes the mine from you and appoints it to someone who can. You had to mine at any cost all the time. The silver must flow. It was really intense in this way. It also mentions the working hours of the miners. By the way, it was 6 hours, so 4 shifts rotate through the day. Substitute workers for sick persons, reasonable payments for miners, and so on. So it's really complex. And that's the first pillar of this reform. Let's take a look at the Italian court.
Right now I am in Italian court. That's the second pillar of this reform, economical reform of Wenceslas II. What was that about? So he chose this place to be a royal mint, and he concentrated all mints from the kingdom to this one place. So that was like 17 companies, 17 different companies were placed in this one fort. I'm saying fort because it was fortified not just against outside of the town, because it's on the edge of the town today, but also it was fortified towards the town, so all around. And it was probably not easily accessible for just someone. This happened together with the mining law and introduction of the groschen around year 1300. If this area of this whole of this whole mining region wasn't important at the time, it definitely was after this decision to make royal mint on this place. So if we are looking for some reason why this historical center of Kutná Hora is where it is and not by some another mining settlements there were around, this may be one of the reasons why that is. And lastly, as I never fail to mention, don't get too attached to the looks of the building today, because it was hugely reconstructed on the turn of 19th and 20th century. So we will probably see it quite differently in the game. Okay, so let's go back to warmth, because it's snowing, as you probably see. That's the feature we will probably not have in the game. So, okay.
Now, the third pillar of this reform, the coin, it was called Prague Groschen, which doesn't make much sense because it was minted in Kutná Hora and it had nothing to do with Prague, but okay. And it was a benchmark, a cornerstone of this monetary system. When it was issued by Wenceslas II, it had almost 3.5 grams of silver, but later we call it the coin spoiled. So that means that the overall weight of the coin got lower, but also the percentage of silver was smaller. So, for example, during the rule of Wenceslas IV, so the guy who's the ruler in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, the minted groschen had under 2 grams of silver. So it over time it went a little bit bad. Anyway, back to Wenceslas II. Money is about trust, and success of the introduction of this coin was that it was used all over the Central Europe. So I would say overall this reform of Wenceslas II was a successful move, if my opinion means anything to you. Okay, so those are the 3 pillars. Repetition is the mother of learning. So again, it was mining law, royal mint in Italian court, and the groschen which were minted there. So as you see, this whole economical system of Bohemian Kingdom, as it was built by Wenceslas II, stood on one single town, the town of Gutenberg. So if you believe in any importance of economy, you can see that Gutenberg was most important town in the Kingdom of Bohemia. Okay, Prague was quite important too. But yeah, you can look at it as one as a center of political power, and the second one of the economical. So something like a little bit like Washington and New York. You know, Washington with his White House. So in this case, Prague Castle, and New York with Wall Street. So in this case, silver mines and the Royal Mint. So yeah, it's literally where all the money of the kingdom were made. Let's go to town walls. Town walls. So if there is a question why this area around here, so where I'm now sitting, developed into a town and it was not some other mining settlement around here, and this may be the final piece to the puzzle. And it's the town walls. So one of the most important features of medieval towns. And this is a story how they quite naturally were built here. But first, some context. We jump to year 1304 and 1307, so just a couple of years after this reform of Wenceslas II, but still 100 years before KCD2. In those years, town was besieged by Albrecht of Habsburg. So I already mentioned him. That's the guy I mentioned in an episode about Sedlec Monastery, that he was first opposed by and then supported by Henry of Lipa. So that's the great-grandfather of Hanush of Lipa. And during the second siege, he was on the side of Albrecht. He was even injured. Then 2 years later, he was captured by Rudharts. So yeah, this interregnum period is so between those two dynasties, Přemyslit and Luxembourg. It's such a mess. I don't want to go anywhere near that now. So let's just stay by those two sieges themselves and why they were important for the development of the town and how the town will look in a game. So because when the walls were built, they were there for centuries. They were They were just turned down 100 years ago. So yeah, it's quite important for the urbanism of the town for a long time. The first siege was in year 1304. The people of Kutná Hora built just some improvised palisade, so there was almost nothing here. And according to legend, because this is this piece of history, it's quite hard to really evaluate, so I call it legend. But yeah, this legend says that the people of Kutná Hora poisoned the stream down here, and the army of Albrecht was laying somewhere around Sedlec Monastery. So when they drank the water, they got diarrhea and it got pretty messy. So they turned and went back to Austria. So the town was saved just by this little trick. But then he came back 3 years later, and the town was already prepared. So the stone walls were all around, and yeah, this is recorded history. So we are quite sure that those walls were built in these 3 years between those two sieges. Now, the reason I think the walls were on the place they were is that they were built alongside the mines. Just to be clear, I'm talking about the walls around the upper town, not the lower one. And the walls were alongside mines not because they wanted to protect the mines, but because around the mines were piles of gunk. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Gunk is all the rock you dig out of mines and which does not contain a silver ore. So it's all the waste you pull out of mines, and you have no use for it. So practically most of the stuff you pull out of mines, because silver ore is just a small part of it. Now, as you can imagine, building the fortification is not just about building a wall, but it also is about digging ditches and pile up ramparts. So this means a lot of landscaping, which is a lot of work. And with these piles of this gunk laying around, it seems like a good idea to put it in work and use it somehow. So let's look on a map of silver veins under the town. The veins are marked by yellow color. So they are kind of all over the place, but what I would like you to focus on are these two directions. There were many mines in those lines, and they kind of border the town from west and east. If I switch to another map, you can see where approximately the town wall was, marked by a red color. South border of the town is naturally enclosed by a steep slope to the valley, and north side is where most of those veins ended. So the idea I have, and not just I, to be clear, it's that they use these piles and somehow they build the stone walls with all the ditches and ramparts with minimal possible effort. And they were able to defend themselves against this army of Albrecht of Habsburg, even the second time when he besieged the town in 1307. And now, finally, let's look on the map of Kuttenberg from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and see if we can spot anything I was just talking about. Let's mark everything that looks like mine. And you can see there are these two directions just by the town walls I was talking about. So on the west and the east. So coincidence? I think not. By the way, this mine between those two lines, it was called by the wheel. So there was probably a wheel in use. And this one looks like it could be entrance to the museum's mine. If you visit Kutná Hora, you can go through that one. So yeah, it looks like it's on the same place. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. We covered a nice chunk of history. Well, it was just a couple of decades, but yeah, the most important ones for development, this early development of Kutná Hora. So those were the crucial ones. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the subscribe button, and if you already did, tell your friends about this channel. I would really appreciate it. Anyway, see you next time.